All right, so for today's webinar, we basically have two goals. Our first goal is to help ANA grant applicants get through the 5-step registration process of becoming fully eligible to submit a grant application online. And this process could take up to 4 business weeks, sometimes more. So if you are planning to apply for a grant this grant cycle, most of the applications are due on April 15th, which is about 46 days away. So you really don't want to wait to get started on the registration. And we'll go over the details later, but keep in mind that those registrations need to be renewed annually for the most part. So even if you think you're up to date, you definitely want to check. And then our second goal is to familiarize applicants with the Grants.gov environment in preparation for submitting an ANA grant application. And we're lucky to have a Grants.gov staff member on our webinar to give our presentation today. So you get to learn straight from the source. And just a reminder before we get started, our funding opportunity announcements for our grants are all now live and published. And these are the documents that outline the scoring criteria for the ANA program areas, as well as the technical requirements for writing your grant application. So if you haven't downloaded those yet, you definitely want to get those now and go through the FOA for the program area you plan to apply for. You can find that on the ANA website. Just go to the grants page, or they also have an announcement on their homepage. So find that on the ANA website, and you'll have direct links to the funding announcements. And the current program areas that are live are our SEDs program, our SEDs program, both of our native language programs, the Native American Language Preservation and Maintenance Grant, as well as the Esther Martinez Immersion Initiative, and our Environmental Regulatory Enhancement Grant, ERE. And so as I mentioned earlier, we are very happy to have Judy Serratia from Grants.gov joining us today. Judy is the Senior Program Advisor in the Grants.gov Program Management Office that hosts the Grants.gov system. Grants.gov is the site where all 26 federal government grant-making agencies post their grant funding opportunities, and where grant applicants can go to find and apply for those opportunities. Judy works closely with both applicants and federal agencies who use Grants.gov. Judy has worked with Grants.gov for the last 3 years. Prior to that, Judy spent 17 years working for HHS's Health Resources and Services Administration in the area of information systems and grant management. And we are very happy to have Judy joining us today. At this time, I'll pass it off to Judy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Matt, for that introduction. I am so happy to be able to be here on your webinar, and hopefully when this is all over, you will have the steps necessary to successfully register prior to the deadline of the application that you are interested in applying for. Applications, I should say. So let's go to the next slide, Matt. So today I'm going to talk to you about everything that you would need to know about Grants.gov, next, through the eyes of the applicant. Today I'm going to talk about basically three pieces of the registration process, how one would go about finding funding opportunities on Grants.gov, and how one would go about applying for those opportunities. So let's get started. Next.
Throughout Judy's.
Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So periodically throughout this presentation, I'll be butting in to kind of contextualize Judy's presentation for the ANA specific process. So actually, what you're learning from Judy, you can apply to any federal grant, really. 26 different agencies list grants through grants.gov. And so you can use what you learn here to find other funding opportunities besides ANA. But since most of us are applying for grants this year, I'll kind of contextualize that for you. So the main thing to remember here is that it's ANA policy that all organizations submit their applications electronically. And so you'll definitely need to know these things if you plan to submit this year. The only way that you can submit by hard copy is if you request a waiver to do so, and that is only awarded for people with limited internet access or computer capacity. So if you feel that you need to submit by hard copy, you must submit your application for a waiver by the end of March. 2 weeks before the deadline. And as I mentioned earlier, you'll definitely want to consult your individual FOA for the specifics of the program area that you're applying for. And keep in mind that this year's FOAs are different than last year's. So definitely go to the ANA website to find the most updated version of your funding announcement. And with that, I'll hand it back off to Judy.
Thank you, Matt. Next slide. So let's talk about the registration process. But before I get started, I want to reiterate what Matt had to say earlier. If you have not registered in grants.gov or to apply for a federal grant, you need to get the process started right away because it can take up to 4 weeks to complete. Next slide. So there's two types of registration in grants.gov. There's what we call the applicant organization applicant, and then there's an individual registration, individual applicants. But for the purpose of today's presentation, we're just going to focus on the organization application process, registration process. So if you don't already have one, you'll need to go right away and get what we call a DUNS number from the Dun & Bradstreet website. And you can reach them by typing www.dnb.com, dunandbradstreet.com in your web browser. Before you do that, you'll need to get your tax ID number from the IRS. Once you, so this process can take up to from 3 to 5 business days. Once you receive your DUNS, you will then go to a separate system, which we call SAM, short for the System for Award Management. And if you've already registered and submitted an application, or even have a grant, you've been through this process, you will remember SAM used to be called CCR, but since then, the CCR system migrated into what the GSA calls SAM. So you take your DUNS, you as the e-business point of contact, which is the person at your organization that oversees all the business processes, will take your DUNS number and go to www.sam.gov. When you register, you will have the ability to oversee the people or the person or people in your organization that will actually submit the application to grants.gov. This person is referred to as the Authorized Organization Representative, or AOR. When you've completed your registration process in SAM, you will receive an MPIN number, which you'll use the first time you log into grants.gov. Your MPIN will serve as your password. This process can also take up to 3 to 5 business days, but can actually take longer depending on how busy the federal government is, because SAM has to make connections with IRS and also with DOD for verification of your DUNS number. Next slide. So once the eBiz POC at your organization has successfully registered in SAM, whoever at your organization is going to submit the application, whoever's going to serve as the AOR, Authorized Organization Representative, would then go into Grants.gov and register as an applicant. Keep in mind that you only have to register once in SAM. You only have to register your organization once. However, you must renew your registration annually. Next. So there's eBiz POC and there's AOR. Now, an eBiz POC, who's part of a big organization, can have the responsibility of having to authorize more than one AOR. But if you represent a small organization, you may serve as both the eBiz POC and the AOR for your organization. However, you will have to have separate accounts in Grants.gov, and the AOR will be the person with the AOR role or account will actually submit the application. Next. So if you're an applicant and you've never registered before, you need to go to Grants.gov and click on the Applicant Registration page. There you will create your applicant account by entering your DUNS number, your name, your password, and at this time you will set up your username and password in Grants.gov. Once you have completed this process, your e-business point of contact, next slide, your e-business point of contact will receive an email telling them to go in and authorize you as AOR so you can submit. Next slide. You can track the status of your authorization at any time by going into your login, using your login to Grants.gov to see if you've been authorized as AOR, or you can call our contact center, and I'll have that information for you at the end of the presentation. Next. Matthew, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Judy. So once again, I can't stress this enough that if you haven't done so yet, you want to start the application process today, and at the latest, start by March 16th, because as Judy said, full registration could take up to 4 business weeks, and not having your registration fully up to date, and you find out maybe a week before a deadline and realize that it's too late, is a really disheartening thing to happen after you worked on your grant application for weeks. So you definitely want to start now. So good thing you're here in this webinar today. And so also when you register your AOR, you want to make sure that that person is reachable and that the contact information that you use, that you register with, is going to be an email address or a phone number that that person is always going to be able to access on a regular basis, and make sure they're checking that email address and all of that. And also, in the ANA rules, your AOR cannot be your project director. So make sure that it's someone else. And once again, I can't stress this enough, please do not procrastinate in registering. And with that, I'll hand it back off to Judy.
Thank you, Matt. Next slide. So the next few slides will go over how you would go about navigating Grants.gov. Next. We just redid our website. So if you haven't been on for a while, you'll notice a big change. We vastly improved our search function. All the data that was on, all the information that was on the old website is still on the new one, but the search function is much, much improved. Next slide. We have Applicant Resources on our website that you can take advantage of at any time. You don't have to have an account. You can go on and you can look at the applicant user guide, and it walks you through the registration process step by step. You can look at the e-business POC registration information and checklists, and There's also general information, and we have a YouTube video that walks you through the registration and submission process as well. So please take advantage of those resources. Next slide. We also have a place on our site where you can manage a subscription. You can set up a subscription to receive information on particular funding opportunities, be it a particular CFDA number or opportunity number, or you could even set up your subscription to receive notifications, email notifications of every time a particular agency or department within an agency posts a funding opportunity. Next slide. So let's take a look at the search. Next. You can search for funding opportunities in many ways on grants.gov. Next. You can search by clicking on newest opportunities, or you can browse categories such as health and housing. You can browse by agency such as HHS or EPA, or you can browse by type of organization such as state and local governments, nonprofits, tribal, universities, etc. Next. You can also run what we call a basic search or an advanced search. For a basic search, you can enter the funding opportunity number or CFDA number, or you can type in keywords that you think may show up somewhere in that funding opportunity. Next. You can refine your search even further. If you take a look at the left-hand side of the screenshot, you can see where we set up what we call a faceted search. So you can narrow down your opportunities that you're looking for even further by choosing all funding instruments, or by narrowing down the eligibility type or the category or date range. Next slide. Next slide. Here we type, oh, I'm sorry, Matt, can you go next?
Okay, thanks, Judy. Thank you.
Matt?
Right.
So slide 33.
Judy just showed you how to find other grant opportunities on grants.gov, and you can also find our ANA grants that way. But you can also go to the ANA website for direct links to the new FOAs, as well as to the grants.gov opportunities. So one thing to keep in mind for ANA grants is that you can only have one active grant per CFDA number at a time. And in addition to that, an organization cannot receive funding for more than 2 projects in a row under the same CFDA number. And so if you look on the slide here, you'll see that our SEDs and SEDs programs are under the same CFDA number. SEDs is a special initiative of SEDs. Both of our native language programs are under the same CFDA number. And ERE has its own CFDA number. So keep that in mind when you're applying, especially for repeat funding. And with that, I'll hand it back off to Judy. Thanks, Judy.
Thank you, Matt. So let's take a look at what's in a funding opportunity. Next slide. So here is a quick peek at Synopsis. This is actually the synopsis for the Social and Economic Development Strategies SEDS program for ANA. So when you've typed in your funding opportunity number and you click enter, it takes you to the synopsis details of that funding opportunity. There you'll find the open and close date and the estimated amount of funding that the program plans to use on that particular opportunity, and the estimated number of awards they plan to make. In addition, you should be able to find program contact information. Next. If you were to click on the tab to the right of the Synopsis details, you would see a tab called, you would see a listing of version history. So if this opportunity has been changed in any way, or modified in any way, you will actually see you can actually look at the older versions of the opportunity. Next slide. To the right of version history is the full announcement tab. Now, some agencies will post information under this tab, and some agencies will not. In this case, we have an example of a funding opportunity in which the DoD did post attachments as well as the guidance or an amendment that they made to one of their guidances. Next. And lastly, we have the application tab. This is where you would actually go to download the application package, which is the set of forms that you'll be filling out, as well as the instructions on how to fill out those forms. Make sure that you download Adobe Reader. It is free. You can get it anywhere on the internet, but make sure you use Adobe Reader. Please do not use any other type of reader. There's lots of them out there on the internet, and they're free. However, Adobe works best with the Grants.gov system, so keep that in mind. Next. So this is the page that you would come up with once you click on the download link next to the funding opportunity that you plan to apply for. You have an opportunity here to leave your email address. If you want to request notifications on any modification made by the agency, if the agency goes in and changes something about that funding opportunity package, you will receive an email right away telling you what to do and what has been changed. Next. So here's the link. Here are the two links that you would end up at in order to access the instructions and the application package. You would click on both of those, right-click download on the instructions, and save as to your computer. And you would do the same thing with download application package. Next. Let's navigate the application package. Next. So when you click on download application package, you'll see a screen similar to this one. It will list all the mandatory forms and sometimes optional forms that the agency is expecting you to fill out and submit. Again, this requires that you download at some point a version of Adobe Reader. Next. While you're working on the form, keep in mind that all the forms eventually will be submitted as one package or zip file. Next slide. This just shows you what a typical, well, this is an actual SF424 application form for a grant, for submitting a federal grant. All the fields that you see highlighted in yellow are mandatory fields, and they must be filled out before you actually submit your application. Also, I want you to keep in mind that you can search on grants.gov. You can download application instructions and packages, and you can fill them out and you can save them and be ready to submit, but you can't actually submit your application until you are registered and you are authorized to be what we call the AOR. Next. Let's submit our application package and see what happens. Next. So you filled out your application and you're ready to submit. You want to save your package. You want to check the package for errors. And it's also a good idea to print your application. Once your application is free of all errors, the Save and Submit button will become activated. Next. When you click on the Save and Submit button, you'll be prompted at this time to fill in your username and your password. If you're not authorized as an AOR, you'll receive an error message and you won't be able to submit your application. Next. Once you have submitted your application, you will be prompted once again by the Sign and Submit application page. Once you click on this page, it will serve as your official electronic signature for your application. Next. This is a very important piece of information you want to keep handy. Once you hit Submit, on your screen will appear what we call the receipt confirmation page. This confirmation page will have a grants.gov tracking number, and it will also have the official date and time stamp of your application, the actual times and date that grants.gov has received your application. You want to save this information in case you have a problem later on and your application is for some reason rejected, either by the system or by the agency. You'll also receive this information in the form of an email. Next. So again, you'll receive an email with the confirmation information with your tracking number. Keep in mind that this does not mean that grants.gov has accepted your application. We've just received it. It needs to be validated further. That's your first email. The second email that you will receive, this is the AOR now that receives this information, not the eBiz, the AOR. You will receive an email telling you that your application has been validated or your application has been rejected, and a reason for the rejection. And the third email you'll receive, if your application is successfully validated, is that the agency for which you are applying for funding has picked up your application from grants.gov and they have it. Next slide. You can track the status of your application at any time on on grants.gov by using your grants.gov tracking number that you received in your confirmation. Please follow the statuses on grants.gov to see it through its complete validation process all the way through until it's received by the agency for which you are applying for funding. Next. Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Judy. So I just want to remind everyone that, as you're looking over these things and downloading your application package, you definitely want to cross-check your FOAs for the specifics of the program area you're applying for. That's where you'll find all of the technical requirements that are specific to the program area that you are applying for. And once again, submit early. Don't procrastinate. That's going to be, that has held up people in the past, including last year, so don't fall into that trap. And Judy did mention the instructions document that you can download with your application package, but I just want to reiterate that. The application package can be kind of tricky, especially if you're not, computer-minded. But the instructions document includes detailed instructions for every form that's included in that application package. So you'll definitely want to use that in conjunction with your application package as you apply. And for those of you who did apply last year, there is a little bit of a change to the application process. Last year, we required 2 application packages. This year, it's going to just be 1. And once again, I know we kind of went through a lot with the submission, with the submission requirements, but you should attend the March 13th webinar for more specifics on submission. And you can find and register for that webinar in the events page on the ANA website. With that, I'll pass it back off to Judy.
Thanks, Matt. Let's go to the next slide. So we just have a couple tips from grants.gov. Make sure, again, you register early so you have time to submit your application. And submit as early as possible. Please don't wait until the last minute to submit your application. It may get rejected, and you may not have time to fix the issue that's causing the rejection in time to get your application submitted. Many agencies, and I'm sure this is true for all of you, they're very strict about deadlines. So make sure you don't wait until the last minute to submit your application. Make sure you read over all the instructions that are provided by the agency. And if you have any questions whatsoever about what the agency is asking you for, contact them directly. They can help you, tell you, what it is that they're looking for in the project narrative and the budget and so forth. If you have any problems whatsoever with grants.gov, you can reach out to the grants.gov contact center at any time, and they can help you. You want to keep in mind that if you are attaching documents, uploading documents to the standard mandatory forms, you'll have to be mindful of the name that you use when you create a file name. You want to make sure that your file names are, that you don't use any crazy special character, and that you also limit the file size name to 50 characters or less. Because if you don't do this, your application could be rejected. Also, make sure that you use the correct DUNS number that you're logged in with. You use that same number on your SF424 cover page of your application. And again, make sure you use a compatible version of Adobe Reader. And lastly, last slide, support is available at our contact center 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can call them at the 800 number. If you're calling out of the country, you can call the international number, and it takes you directly to our contact center, or you can send an email at support@grants.gov. And again, remember to take advantage of the resources that are on our website for all applicants. Next slide. Matt?
Thanks, Judy.
Turning it over to you.
So in addition to all of those resources that Judy listed at grants.gov, we're also here to help you apply. So first of all, you'll want to consult your FOAs. Once again, that is the most official, straightforward set of rules to help you apply for your program area. You can also call the ANA toll-free helpline, which you can see on the screen there. The ANA website is also a great resource. So you can check out the resources section to find archived webinars, including this one, which you can watch later. It might be useful as you're applying to watch it again. You can also find our training manuals there in the resources section. You can go to the events section to find upcoming webinars, including the March 13th webinar on the application part of it, as well as upcoming pre-application trainings, which are being held around the nation, including your region. And we're actually here on Oahu in a pre-application training right now, doing this webinar live. And we are the Pacific Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. We help organizations in the Pacific apply for ANA grants. So if you're in the Pacific region, you can definitely call our office. But we also have regional offices across the nation, East, West, Alaska, and the Pacific region. So you can find your regional office through the ANA website if you're not already in touch with them. And that would probably, the TTA centers would probably be your first call if you're having questions. And so with that, I want to thank Judy for her presentation today. Thank you, Judy. We're very grateful to have your expertise in today's webinar. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm glad I could help.
So Judy will be standing by during our question and answer session, which will start now. On the line, we also have staff members from ANA, including Richard Glass, our contracting officer for the TTA centers. So if you do have a question, you can ask it in one of two ways. First of all, click the raise hand button, which looks like a little hand in the participants box if you have a question. We'll answer the questions in the order that they were received. You can either ask by typing into the chat box or by pressing the top button and speaking through your computer's microphone. So at this time, we'll open up the line for questions. And if you do have a question, just click that raise hand button and we'll direct it to the appropriate expert.
Hi, Matt and everyone. This is Richard Glass over at ANA, and I just, as people are thinking of some questions, wanted to address one that came up earlier, and we did answer in the chat, but want to make sure everyone hears it. And there was a question about whether an applicant can apply for a SEDs grant and a SEDs grant at this within the same year. And it's a two-part answer. Yes, you can apply, but it is an administrative policy listed in our funding opportunity announcements that you can only have one award under a single CFDA number. So what that means is you can only have an active SEDS grant and or an active SEDS grant. You can't have a SEDS and a SEDS grant at the same time. So if you do apply under both and you score in the funding range under both, you would only be awarded one, and in that case, there'd be discussions on which one, but you can only be awarded once, but you can apply more than once. I hope that clarifies it. Thanks.
All right, and we actually have a question from someone here in our pre-application training room on Oahu, and I'll let her ask that question now.
Hi, so my question was about the AOR person. My project, we're going to use a fiscal sponsor because we're not a 501c3 yet. And so does that AOR person have to be a representative from the fiscal sponsor, the 501c3 that we're using?
And I think I'll direct that question to the room at ANA.
Yeah, sure. Hi, thanks, Kathy. Thanks for the question. It kind of depends exactly on what the situation is. What I can tell you is we don't want to have what you call pass-through, where you have a situation where we're awarding the grant to one organization, but then all the projects being implemented by another. That's not okay. And I don't think that's exactly what I was hearing, but I did want to say that. So if you're a 501c3, and it really depends who the organization is that is applying and who will be implementing the grant and who will be getting the money. So those kind of specifics, I think you can probably touch base with Matt or call the ANA help desk so we can hear the exact situation. But generally, the AOR is the person who's signing that, yes, we're going to take this grant and we're holding these responsibilities for implementing the grant and these terms and conditions of the notice of award. And we're responsible for implementing it as we're saying it, as according to all this information and spending the money correctly. So in most cases, yes, but there can be specifics. So, and I think another question came up on an AOR. That's an authorized representative. So they're basically the person who signs the signs the resolution if there's a resolution. They're the ones that put on the 424, which is a federal form. They're often an executive director or a chairperson, kind of the main boss, the person who's responsible and saying, yes, this organization is going to submit this. It's often someone that might be different than the actual project director. You'll see in the 424 that there's a spot you can put the AOR, which is kind of the boss, and then there's another spot to put person who should be contacted with regards to this project, and that's often the person who's writing it, the project director, who kind of knows the specifics. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Rich. And we have another question from Salita. So the FOA, for those of you who came in late, is the funding opportunity announcement. These are the documents that outline the scoring criteria and technical requirements for the specific grant that you're applying for. And Mia Strickland from ANA posted a much better definition there in the chat box. Thank you, Mia. So we have one more question in our pre-application training room, and I'll allow him to ask that question now.
I had a question about the diacritical marks for the Hawaiian words. Is that allowable, or would you recommend not using the markings? Or I'm familiar with other submissions processes which the proposal gets uploaded as a PDF, and therefore the diacritical marks are allowed. So I was just wondering through this system whether those markings are allowed or not.
Yeah, great question. I think I'll direct that question to Judy, and then maybe someone from ANA could follow up if needed. So the question was about special characters like language diacritical marks that individuals might use within their application package, and if that would affect the submission at all. Do you want to try and answer that, Judy?
Yes, I can try and answer that. So if you enter a special character anywhere in the form, it could cause you an error in your submission. As long as you're uploading a form and you have a special character within that application or within that document, it's not going to validate on the information that's in the document itself, but it will validate on the file name. So you want to make sure that you don't use any special character when you name your file, your attachment file. So if you're going to upload, say for instance, like you just said, a PDF file to one of the standard forms like the project narrative attachment or whatever, and you have those special markings or special characters within the text of that file, you should be okay. But just don't name your file with a special character because the system will see it and reject it because it's going to see it as something different than it actually is. A lot of systems, unfortunately, are like that everywhere. They tell you when you set up passwords and things like that, they'll have a certain set of characters they want you to use, and they'll tell you what not to use. So in this case, it would have to be something that's very unusual. We just recently relaxed those rules. For file attachment name, it used to be very rigid, the validation, but it's gotten a little bit better. So hopefully you won't run into that problem. And if you do, and you'll get an email with telling you that your application was rejected, it'll tell you what you need to do. And if you can't tell from that email, just reach out to the contact center and they can walk you through how to rename your attachment file name so that it actually will submit. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. That was a great answer. And we also had some clarification from Mia Strickland at ANA. She said there is some guidance in the FOA on how exactly to name your files. So you could consult the funding opportunity announcement for that. But basically, as Judy said, keep the special diacritical marks out of the file names, but having them within your application package, for example, the text in your project narrative, that should be okay. All right, and the line is still open for questions, so anyone with a question, feel free to ask now.
Hi, Matt. This is Richard. Looking at a question here about a five-step registration registration for getting set on grants.gov. So could we maybe just get a restatement of what those are? I think we have applying for DUNS, registering on SAM, and registering on grants.gov. And Kathy asked if there's something else.
No. As far as grants.gov goes, no. You want to get a DUNS number, then you need to go to SAM, and then you need to register in grants.gov. So there's really 3 steps. If you want to make sure that your SAM registration is active to that list of steps, you can, but it's typically 3 steps. You can also, if you wanted to add the step to authorize the AOR, you could. But I just break it down into 3 sections. You're not missing anything. If you follow all those steps and you're successful at each one of those steps within the process, you're good to go.
Yeah, I think there's
all this information again is on our website.
Yep. Yeah. So it's basically those 3 steps, right? Thank you for the question.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we have one last question from Kathy. Is this PowerPoint or is the recording of this webinar available on your website? This recording will be available on the ANA website. You'll be able to find that in the resources section in about a week. So once we get this webinar archived, transcribed, and uploaded, you'll be able to find it in the resources section of the ANA website, along with all of our archived webinars. And you can just search by keyword, and it'll pull up some. It should pull up this webinar as well as other cool ones that we've done in the past, and that can really help you with applying. So if there are no other further questions, we'll move on and close out this webinar. Okay, thank you. And just to reiterate, our webinar goals today were, number 1, to help ANA grant applicants get through, let's say, the 3-step registration process of becoming fully eligible to submit a grant application online. Once again, you want to start as soon as possible. This process could take up to 4 business weeks, actually up to 6 business weeks to finish, but you just want to start as soon as possible. And the other goal was to familiarize applicants with the grants.gov environment in preparation for submitting an ANA grant application. And I think Judy did a great job in helping to acclimate us to the new and beautiful grants.gov website. Just to remind you.
Thank you very much for those remarks. I really appreciate that, Matt. And I hope that folks on the line on the webinar were able to learn some things that they didn't know before, or were reminded of things that they may have already known. But we have a contact center that's set up just for applicants, so please reach out to them anytime, day or night.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Judy.
And best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on March 13th, we'll have a webinar specifically on the submission process. That'll focus a little more on the application, and it'll be a little closer to application time, so it might be a good refresher. Of course, you can always pull up the archive of this webinar later, but you definitely want to sign up for that March 13th webinar if you're interested in the submission process. And we also have a couple of other webinars coming up in March, developing your OWP and budget, which is really good for anyone applying for a grant this cycle, and grantee success stories of good planning. And that's just good for anyone who is starting a project, community project. So mahalo for joining us today. My name once again is Matt. I am the Outreach and Technology Specialist for the Pacific Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. You can email me if you have any questions or if you want clarification on anything that was presented today. My phone number is there on the screen, 808-485-8182, and you can visit our regional website at anapacificbasin.org. And to start registering now, visit www.grants.gov. And once again, this is a national webinar made possible by the Administration for Native Americans. So I'm going to end the recording now.